Hey, good afternoon. It's Raven Tactical here. I've been doing a couple things. I've been doing the kind of the me videos, I guess if you want to call it, and I've been putting up small news clips or current event clips. It's just basically there to help build some channel and get some people coming out here. It helps just kind of get anybody searching. So it also kind of gives people a little bit different ideas and kind of what people are looking for as well. I know the drone footage is getting a lot of feedback. So with that, I'm going to talk about the Me video series. This is the third part. And we had left off with when I bought the Probe. And it was a 1990 Ford Probe GT, 5-speed, white, pretty loaded. And I loved it. Like, it was such a car that it kind of freed you from, I don't know, it was the car that gave you the freedom, I guess. The freedom to drive and have something fun, and have something you work for, and have something that you worked hard for. I worked 2 jobs in high school. I mean, I literally don't remember having too many weekends off. I did busing tables, and I worked for a media and television company for the government, for the local government channel. And it was different. It was fun. It was sporty. It was quick. And then immediately, because I was relatively new to driving stick, I might have broke it. And so I went to the shop, and I came back out. And while I was searching for parts for it, I came across a forum, like the old forums back in the day, because this was back in the day, called probetalk.com. And probetalk.com became kind of a gateway drug to the automotive side of everything that I like and everything that cabin. I found out there was a Wisconsin chapter, and with that, I met the Wisconsin Probe Owners Club, and we met. It was weird because I was very quiet and shy, so it took a bit, and I met people on the forum, and we wound up meeting out on Highway 100 at one point, and it was big at that time. I mean, everything was fast and furious at the time, so you saw quite a bit. And then it was tuner culture, so you had the Hondas and all this. Here we are with Probes and MX6s, kind of like the redheaded stepchild of tuner culture. And it was a good time. And what happened was, I broke out of my shell of like this quiet kid who never went anywhere, and it allowed me to meet people who were good people and go on a trip to Ohio to go see Hocking Hills and go down to Myrtle Beach in a couple of years. So Hocking Hills was what they would call the kind of the Midwest, had a meetup for all the Midwest guys, but people from the East Coast did, and it was down at Hocking Hills, Ohio. And Hocking Hills was around Logan, Ohio. What we did was we camped for cheap. So I mean, these things weren't expensive. I mean, getting down there was probably more expensive, but for like $12 you could stay for the weekend, camp in this pit, and you'd have a car show in the morning. That Saturday morning, people drank. I drank my fair share because it was just, that it was relatively safe. You were with people. And then Saturday morning, you'd go for a cruise on 664. We'd go out to Old Man's Cave, and you get a chance to walk around there, and it's a big park, and really kind of a really cool place. And you drove back, you grilled out, you had a great time, you met people from all over. And this is also kind of like the same point when like cell phones weren't like, not everybody had one just yet. And it was also at the same point where like the internet was still really kind of dial up, or just the beginning of broadband. So it was also like probetalk.com was run pretty shadily, like it would just go down and the server would go down. It was also a chance for people to really meet up and hang out, and it was cool to put a face to a name, and you got to meet the different club people and the different affiliates, and I think it was just a simpler time. There wasn't as much petty differences, and it was just fun. Like, I just remember that car being just a fun car where it wasn't like super stupid fast, and we modified it and dropped the suspension, increased the boost, put better stickier tires on it, and put different sway bars and all that stuff on it, and it was good handling, fun little car that could get you into trouble with it. I mean, that was kind of the start of the beginning of a lot of things that I did with that car, and it opened the doors where I found myself not always being this like quiet kid, like this, I guess, church mouse kid, but it was more like I was able to be somewhat expressive and creative, and there was a little bit of talent in it, and I got to be vocal, and I got to have like what I would consider like you find your balls in life. You kind of find who you are, and it really was interesting to be able to do that. Later on, I think I picked up a Fiero, which was funny, and the old joke about the Fiero starting on fire, this one did. It was an old 84 Fiero, and whoever owned it previously had done some really horrendous like hack mods, but I think I only paid a couple $100 for the car, and I just wanted a backup car because you quickly learn your car that you're racing or whatever can't always be your daily driver at the same time. So I was trying to get a second car. It would have to be a Fiero, and the car was just different. Yeah, it was a very small car. I'm 6'2", and to get in it, you're sliding into it. It was fine. It ran and drove and got you around town. It had someone ran alternator wire, like the signal wire, the power wire for the alternator went across the valve cover. And what I didn't know was the guy just rigged it, and it started arcing out, and it arced out a hole through the valve cover, and it was setting the valve cover on fire. And it was just funny. Like, it just shows you some of the ingenuity of like GM's Iron Duke 2.4s. Like, this thing is literally on fire, but it still works. Like, it ran just as fine as it did, when it rolled off the floor. It still had the same lack of power, and it was this. And it was just a couple funny things. And it was interesting to drive because it was rear-wheel drive, rear engine, and it wasn't fast. It was just stupid. Like, you could get it sideways, sort of. And I think it was only a 4-speed manual at the time, and it drove, and it just bared, I went and sold it just because I needed to get rid of it. Couldn't have two cars at the time. And so I sold it, got rid of that. I think at another time I picked up a 89 Ford Probe LX, which was the old 3-liter ones. We wound up swapping. The white one was rusting out really bad. When we were looking at it, working on it, and happened to find out that the frame was really bad. And what happened with those cars was the sunroof models in Wisconsin had a lot of drain holes that would go through the frame. And what would happen is they'd get plugged, and then the salt and rain would get them in there, and they would just rot out from the inside. And so mine was really, really bad shape. It was like every time you lifted it up, it would get, the frame rail would get crushed. The back quarter panel from the inside was completely gone. I mean, I had the car for quite a couple of years, and it was just starting to pretty much die. The engine and transmission were strong, and the suspension was fine. So a buddy of mine he picked up a donor GT car from Michigan, and he needed something off of it for his car. And what we did was we swapped all the good parts from my car into his car, into that chassis. And that was kind of a fun experience in a way, where you got together to work in a garage, and you're working on it for a couple weekends. I mean, I should say a lot of weekends, and you're working on it, trying to get things together. And it was just an experience that, I appreciate having. Like, I know everybody else, like my parents and everybody else, got frustrated with it, but it's the American tradition of like getting the chance to like build your car and work on it and getting hands-on and learning about it. And it didn't work out as well as we hoped. Everything got rushed in the end, and I never, a lot of things got rushed, and life happened. So one of the games, I think I sold it. I sold it to some kid, and then I remember actually I sold it to some kid. He wound up crashing it, and Well, the best part was what happened later on was I wound up buying a 95 Ford Probe. So to understand that, if you're not familiar with it, that's the next generation. It was the much more, I would call it, sleeker, roundy body style. I mean, if you ever take a chance, look at the Ford Probe lineup in '93. Look at all the cars that came out, and that car stands out as a much more modern looking car that probably even today would still hold its own. I mean, it's a little dated, but it still holds its own. The guy had put a JDM motor in it, so the KLZE, it had a 5-speed. The suspension was already done. Some of the exhaust work was done. So I mean, I picked up kind of a pre-modded car. It already had tried. He almost got killed by the car because he didn't put drop blocks on it, got underneath it, and it rolled over him. So that was kind of an interesting thought. But that was a fun car. It was the night and day difference. The first gens were very torquey and power, and like they had a lot of like low end power. It wasn't a high revving car. It was just a lot of torque. You could feel it. It would torque snapped. And the second gen was like a more refined car, in my opinion, especially with the JDM motor. You really could wind it out to about $7,000 or a little higher, and it was just kind of a better handling, probably I would say a better daily driver car in a way. And it was fun. I liked it. I really did. It just, again, one of those things where like little things that break, and it's like, oh, and you're not really, even at the time I wasn't street racing with it either, because the white one got me my ticket that really screwed things up for me. And I'll cover tickets in a different video someday, because there's quite a few. And the red KLZE was just a fun overall car. You could get 35 miles to the gallon doing 85 miles an hour on the freeway. It was one of those cars, and it was geared well, and actually got better gas mileage at 85 than 70. It's just weird. And it was fun. It handled extremely well. I put more money into suspension parts onto it. I wound up, before I sold it, had a limited slip transmission. I bought that because I thought the transmission broke. And that was a cool car. I really wanted to autocross with it. And it was one of those things again, your friends are autocrossing, but they're all autocrossing their autocross car. They're not autocrossing their daily driver to get to work. So it was always, 2 steps forward or a step forward and 2 steps back with, things I wanted to do as a hobby. I just couldn't afford it. And it was fun. It was a good car. Loved it. Could go fast, for what it was. And it was just, there it was. I think in between I had a Dodge Diplomat that I never even really drove much. And that was kind of a scam car that I got scammed out of. That was supposed to be a cop car. I'm trying to think of what else in between. If there was anything beyond that one. Oh, well, I did pick up a 89 MX-6, which was like the first gen GT again, because I went back to that. And that was all decked out with a bunch of stuff that some guy put together. And it was cool. I liked it. But it was like missing power steering, and it needed a lot of work. And it just became an issue of, I just don't have the time. So, I mean, life is funny that way. So I wound up selling the MX-6. I wound up selling the JDM Probe. And at the time all this was going on, I was starting to enlist in the military. So that's what really kicked it off, was I was starting to enlist. So I had to get rid of a bunch of things. So the only thing I had left was, and I had bought a Ford Ranger at the time. It was a 96 Ford Ranger, 4-wheel drive, 5-speed, the bigger cab, the longer box, the off-road package. And that was a very cool truck. I really liked that one. And I also picked up, because I worked at a car dealership, some kid was selling an 89 WS6 Formula, and it was just a pile of junk vehicle. It was kind of a funny car. It was just a little, it was rusted, it needed a ton of work, it had Bondo all over it, but it was kind of a fun car to drive because it had T-tops. It had the highway gearing, like the 298 gearing, so it was slow, but on the freeway it got good gas mileage. So overall, it was kind of a good car to go to work and back, because you got decent mileage. It was just a fun car to T-tops down and windows down. You could just cruise, and it was, you're having a good time playing music and throwing a cheap CD player in it and blasting the Villainize and all this. So, those couple cars were just fun. A lot of things in my life were changing. I got out of the car club. I think we were in the car club for 5 years and went to everything. And that's when, things change. Life changes, your goals change. And with all the jobs and everything, I finally got burnt out from working for places that would just fold. You'd finally get a place where you want to work and they make decent money, and the bottom would drop out, and they're like, yeah, sorry, the company is gone. It happened to me that was the second time it happened, and I went, really? And that's what really led to me going into the military, which meant, yeah, you can't just sit here with 2 cars in your title in your name with 2 cars. So I wound up selling the WS6. I kept the Ranger and put that in storage while I went through basic and AIT. I held on to the Ranger for quite a while as I went through it, because then I immediately deployed. So, and in between that, I got married. So then there was the first wife there. So that was a whole different experience. So I'm gonna leave that at that point here. I know it's kind of probably rushing several years, but just getting caught up on a couple things, and then I'll talk a little bit more, where I went from there and beyond. Appreciate you guys subscribing. We got a subscriber boost. The little short clips seem to be really helping out, getting the algorithm to get people to the channel. I really hope people can share it. I know the content is kind of all over the place, and I do appreciate it. And I know people really probably for the most part don't care who I am, but it was kind of nice to be able to talk about, put it on video, so maybe one day, if I'm never here, people can actually remember who I was. With that, Raven Tactical out.